When I think of Pokemon Sapphire, it always brings up a ton of nostalgic feelings. It was the first ever Pokemon game I got as a kid, and it lays very close to my heart. However, after playing through it dozens of times, it has kind of lost that magic. Luckily for me and all of you watching, a new ROM hack called Royal Sapphire just dropped that aims to fix that. The creator, Shockingly Gongas, describes it as a heavy enhancement reimagined version of the Hoenn region. But what does this entail exactly? It tries to stay as true to the regular Generation 3 Sapphire we all know and love, while adding in new story elements. Some regional Pokemon have replaced their normal variants. It also aims to ramp up the difficulty, but not too much, to give you a little bit more of a challenge, so you're not just mashing A through every fight and actually have to think about your decisions. Every single map location has also been altered, so you have a fresh feeling while you're playing through the game. It also has increased shiny odds, and the full pokedex is going to be available to us, which is perfect for me since I'll be 100% completing the game today. So put on your swimming suit because we're jumping into a submarine and diving straight into Pokemon Royal Sapphire. As we get to the introduction screen, there's an immediate change that takes effect. The player character has gotten a palette swap to blue, which fits the aesthetic of Pokemon Sapphire a lot more. This is definitely a minor but very welcomed tweak. After this, we crawl out of the back of a moving van with a ton of back pain. After telling our mom this was borderline child abuse, we head over to the next door neighbors where we meet our new rival May. She's the local professor's daughter and explains to me that his lab just got an upgrade, so I had to go and check it out. Unfortunately, he didn't seem to be around. After heading back outside, we heard screams coming from Route 1 that nearly bursted my eardrums. Here we saw the local professor getting attacked by a Poochyena, and there was only one way we could save this guy, by taking out one of the Pokemon that were in his bag. We had some very interesting choices here, namely the regional forms of Slowpoke, Sneasler, and Qwilfish. They would all have the poison typing, which I thought was pretty interesting. And while Qwilfish and Overqwil can have the Intimidate ability, I personally preferred Sneasel and Sneasler, because they have been VGC powerhouses for quite some time. So my choice was easy. We then saved Professor Burge by clawing through Poochyena, and went back to his lab where we could lock in the Sneasel permanently. But only if we helped out his daughter May by doing some field research. I tried to make my way over to her, but a couple of interesting things happened. Like, for example, if you want to know what version you're on and want to unlock the National Pokedex, you need to talk to the scientist on Route 1. Inside of Oldale Town, you'd also be able to pick up the fishing rod. So no more old, good, or super rod. Every Pokemon can be captured with this one alone. We would then finally reach May on Route 103, and she would already have two Pokemon, Galarian Slowpoke and Pichu. This wasn't really a great matchup for my Sneasel, and even though we got paralyzed by her Pichu, we still came out on top, showing that we indeed picked the right starter. With our first trainer victory claimed, we headed back to the lab where I made a promise to the professor that I would be the one to achieve his dream, completing the Pokedex and finalizing his field research. With tears in his eyes, he sent me out the door on this quest. Stopped me to give me my running shoes, and we Sonic sped straight into the grass on Route 1, where we could start one of the longest catching sprees ever. As usual, the early routes are indeed filled with early game Pokemon. That's how I got my hands on Poochyena, Mareep, Sentret, Lediba, Ralts, Wurmple, Meowth, Teddiursa, both Nidoran male and female, and finally the rarest Pokemon here was Eevee. We definitely need another Eevee later on because we need to do some breeding to get all the evolutions, but there is a new Eevee gift inside of Lavaridge Town, so I'll be betting my money on that. After this, we made a quick stop in Oldale Town to do our first set of fishing encounters, which consisted of Remoraid, Lovedisk, and Azurill. I also turned into a bird keeper for a second because basically all of Route 3 was filled with flying types. This gave us Swablu, Hoppip, Pidgey, Spearow, and Hoothoot. The next route should be named after Toby Flenderson because there was only normal types available. Inside of the grass, I collected Whismur, Zigzagoon, Rattata, and Skitty. With our trusty fishing rod, we also picked up two water types in Tentacool and Goldeen before making it to Petalberg City where my divorced dad lives. But I wouldn't be checking in on him yet. Because I was in need of Pokeballs, I decided to check out the local Pokemart. And everything here seemed to be at a discount. Pokeballs for $5. And nearly everything else materials from berries to healing items, and even the most controversial item in all of Pokemon, rare candies. Personally, I love them because they save me a lot of time, and if the game is just going to give them to me, then I'll be taking full advantage of that opportunity. Plus, it gives you a lot more freedom to play around with your team in case you're stuck at a gym. Anyway, nearly every single town and city has also gotten some kind of encounter patch in case you want to nuzlocke the game, so you'll have more team members available for your fights. Petalberg was no different. With grass and fishing encounters combined, we were able to get Togepi, Cleffa, Igglybuff, Slackoth, Magikarp, and Krabby. We then went ahead and said hello to our father, who not even 2 seconds into our conversation already gives us a task of giving some green-haired kid named Wally a catching tutorial. He must have heard that we've already captured more Pokemon than him in the span of a couple of hours, but that's just what happens when your son's a prodigy. Who knows, maybe in a couple of hours we'll already be stronger than our father. But until then, I got Wally his Ralts, got some words of praise, and got ready for some sun tanning on Route 104's beach. Eventually, I got annoyed with the sand crunching in my butt cheeks, so I fished up Psyduck and my first starter Totodile, which meant we could get to the grass encounters next. It ended up being 4 of them: Poliwag, Execute, Lotad, and Surskit. After getting these, I started shaking in fear because a bug started crawling up my arm since we were getting close to Petalberg Woods. Even though I absolutely hate those critters, I still need to add all of them to the Pokedex, so I channeled my inner bug catcher and got Weedle and Caterpie. There were also some other very interesting encounters like Shroomish, Pikachu, Bellsprout, Oddish, Bulbasaur, Sunkern, and everybody's favorite nut, Seedot. As we got deeper into the forest, I suddenly ran into a super cool looking guy who had clearly joined the Swamp Squad. This was easily recognizable by his sunglasses. You may think, what is the Swamp Squad? Well, it's our group of channel members. They get Pokemon named after them in every single video, a special role in our Discord, and a couple of other neat things. So if any of this interests you and you want to support the channel, it is always highly appreciated. But not to worry, because subscribing helps me out just as much, as we're still on the road to that 1 million subscriber golden play button. Now with that out of the way, let's save this cool guy from this absolutely degenerate pirate and enter the newly updated Rustboro city. It not only looks more majestic, it also has this cool Pidgey on a roof that I just wanted to show off. I also got my free Quick Claw from the local trainer school, and since we're about to take on our first ever gym leader, Roxanne, I did some team building by evolving both Cleffa and Lotad into Clefairy and Lombre, and adding water types like Remoraid and Luvdisc to the squad as well. With these beauties, I rolled up to Roxanne's crib, raring and ready to turn all of her rock types into dust. But I was surprised to see that her leading Pokemon was not a rock type at all, not even a ground type in fact. She opted to use a Nidoran female to catch grass type users off guard. But I wasn't scared because my gun of a fish just had to shoot 2 rounds of mud to clear it off the field. Then she would try to beat me with the past, but her Kabuto also got shot down with a single bullet seed. Next up would be Nosepass, so I brought out Sneasel and tanked a Rock Tomb. After this, I broke its nose with 2 more low kicks, which made her bring out a Geodude. I was expecting a ground type move here, so I swapped out into Lombre and tanked a Dig. We then proceeded to blast it out of here with more bullet seeds, which also ended up happening for her next Pokemon Onyx, but her final team member, Hisuian Growlithe, used Swagger to confuse me, and because I was too stubborn to switch out, my Lombre eventually hit itself to death. However, unlike other dogs, this little rock puppy doesn't like to play with a garden hose, so I let my Totodile spray some water on it, which would be enough for me to claim my stone badge. After heading outside, we heard a rumor that Team Aqua was once again up to no good, as they were stealing Pokemon and sensitive information. So we followed the same grunt we met in Petalberg Woods to the Rusturf Tunnel, and used our lovely swimming heart to wipe out his entire squad and sent him back to his fellow crewmates. Mr. Briny's Wingull also got returned home safely, but I couldn't join him yet for that free boat ride. No, there were a lot of encounters for me to get inside of this tunnel, as well as Route 116. These hosted Coughing, Cubone, Zubat, Phanpy, Grimer, Geodude, Aron, Swinub, Machop, Mankey, Makuhita, speed boost Torchic, which is going to be very handy in the future. And of course, I needed to grab 3 Tyrogues for all 3 Hitman brothers. With these side quests out of the way, we get a couple of rewards. Firstly, the HM for cut, which is actually required in this game, unlike in regular Ruby and Sapphire. And from the president of the Devon Corporation, we got ourselves the best phone on the entire Pokemon market, the PokeNav, which adds another way for my dad to ignore me. And speaking of dads, this guy also has a son called Steven Stone, and we need to go and deliver a letter to him in Dewford town. With that in the back of our mind, we left his office and grabbed our final few Rustboro encounters behind the gym. These were definitely meant to make your fight against Brawly easier, as all of them turned out to be psychic types like Drowsy, Abra, Spoink, and Natu. To do even more prep for Brawly, I also did a few extra evolutions. Whirlpool all the way into Beautifly, Pidgey into Pidgeotto, and Hoppip to Skiploom. We then backtracked through Petalberg Forest by cutting down a tree and observing a very weird Chikorita that seemed to be blocking off some kind of path. What lies beyond it is currently a mystery, but I'm sure it'll be important for us to complete our goal of filling out the Pokedex. We then made it to the other side of the woods and joined Mr. Briny on a relaxing boat ride to Dewford town. Here I would pick up a Sill Scarf to boost some of my normal type moves, and check out the newly added patches of grass to acquire Venonat, Aipom, Paris, Keknia, Pineco, Yanma, and the Itsy Bitsy Spider Spinnerack. I also noticed that you can now travel west from Dewford, where there is an entire new beach that leads you to an abandoned shipwreck. This is, however, still blocked off by a rock-smashing rock, so we'll have to beat Brawly first if we want to get past here. I did also bring out my trusty Raw to grab Carvana, Shelder, and Seal, plus I evolved my Ralts into Kirlia, which would see us fully prepared to step into the ring with the fighting-type gym leader. But he'd also be prepared with the boxing champion Hitmonchan as his first Pokemon. He would use Fake Out and 2 of the elemental punches to finish off my Beautifly, but not before I paralyzed him with a Stun Spore and nearly blew him away with 2 gusts. Pidgeotto would then deliver the final blow with Quick Attack, and his answer to this would be sending out Machamp. I immediately thought that my bird was easily going to wipe this thing, but Gust didn't even do half of its HP. So while we did manage to bring him down to a sliver, in the end he was still able to bury me under a Rockavalanche. One more Aerial Ace from Skiploom did do the trick after this, but he would have a special trick up his sleeve, Aipom. This monkey is so strong that it easily wipes the floor with my Sneasel after using an Aerial Ace and Headbutt combo. Plus, it also survived one of my low kicks with quite a lot of HP left. The only thing I could still do here was bring in Skiploom to use Mega Drain, which would eventually slurp him up. His last 3 Pokemon were by far the worst of his team members, starting out with Elekid, who got poisoned by my Poison Powder, and once it punched me into the stratosphere with a Fire Punch, I could bring in Kirlia and spam Confusion to break the mind of him, Makuhita, and his final Pokemon Metatite. With a Black Eye and the Knuckle Batch under our belt, we leave the gym and check out the abandoned ship, which is now swarming with Team Aqua Grunts. After doing some investigating and wiping most of them out, we ended up finding a Mag Bike, which we definitely needed to traverse Granite Cave. We also learned that they're looking for rare Pokemon as well as a special scanner here, but so far their efforts haven't really brought them anything. We also need Dive to traverse the rest of the ship, so for now we'll leave this place alone and see how much Granite Cave has changed. First things first, I capture a Rhyhorn on the regular level. Then I use my newly acquired bike to traverse a few obstacles. This then led me to a puzzle room, where you have to drive over holes as fast as possible and make quick turns to get to the other side. Personally, I kind of dislike these puzzles because I just keep on falling into holes, but that's just a skill issue on my part. And if you just give it a little bit of time, you can easily get to where you want to go, which for me was the Sun Room, where we would get a ton of fire-type encounters. I'm talking Magby, Houndour, Numel, Growlithe, Ponyta, Slugma Balls, and of course our fiery mouse Cyndaquil. I also delivered the letter to Steven Stone and was surprised to see that this room was changed up as well. I think the little sapphires that were added in the corners already make this room feel more mysterious and alive. And it makes me wonder why they weren't used more in the regular games. But enough asking stupid questions, let's head over to Slateport Beach, which is a place I would no longer relax at, because the beautiful sand is now filled with boulders and and clutter, which sort of ruins the beachy vibe for me. On top of this, the soda pop house also got broken into, so there's no way for me to get some nice refreshments, which meant I left this place in the dust and went to Slateport City instead. Here I learned that nearly every Pokemon Center has a different sponsor. For example, here you can trade in heart skills to relearn some of your Pokemon's forgotten moves, with other Pokemon Centers might have move deleters or other things. Once I was done checking that out, I spoke the language of the sleeping Snorlax and proceeded to have the best sleep of my entire life. I also prepared my team for a hard gauntlet battle back at the museum by evolving Mareep into Fluffy, Magikarp into Gyarados, Slackoth into Vigoroth, Ledybot to Ledian, Sentret into Furret, and finally Hoot Hoot to Noctowl. After this, we would enter the museum ourselves to try and find Captain Stern, but the two Team Aqua admins, Shelly and Matt, were here to teach me a lesson for spoiling their plans in the past. They would each have 5 Pokemon, which meant you were up against 10 of them, while you're only allowed 6. I'd be lying if I said I did this on my first try. It definitely took me a couple of attempts to build a team that could overcome these two, but eventually we were able to. First up was my Fluffy, who was able to take down Shelly's first 3 Pokemon by spamming Spark. Lydian would then use his Silver Winds to take care of her Starmie, and last but not least, Gyarados would bite away at her Ghastly. This meant we still had 4 Pokemon remaining to try and take down Matt. First up would be his Poliwhirl, who would use a combination of Hypnosis and Body Slam to put my Gyarados to sleep or paralyze him, which in this fight ended up being the death of my big Leviathan. Yes, we were able to bring down Poliwhirl to red HP, so now Vigoroth just needed to hit one more headbutt to finish it off. Noctowl would then break Makuhita's brain with Confusion, bring down Wartortle all the way to 1 HP with Secret Power, and then bit the dust due to Ice Punches. With a few more headbutts, Wartortle and the next Pokemon Krabby would also be defeated by Vigoroth, leaving him with just his Cloisters. So we used Yawn to put it to sleep, but they would still be able to drown me out with a Bubble Beam. This left me with just Furret, who started out by knocking off his Berry Juice to get rid of his heal, and then we could smash its shell into a million pieces by hitting it with 3 double kicks in a row. Archie then warns us to stay out of their business because this won't be the last we see of them, but I'm not going to let him turn Hoenn into even more water. I would definitely be on Team Magma side if I was living here. Now with the Devon goods secured, we could leave the museum and grab all the Pokemon in the surrounding areas. Our fishing encounters consisted of Corsola, Horsey, and Corphish, and the regular ones were Snubbull, Ekans, Minun, Plusle, Chikorita, Lickitung, and Roselia. The cycling road was no longer blocked off by a checkpoint. Instead, there's some martial arts guy trying to push a big rock away because everybody that's on the other side without Surf is currently stranded there. I told him that I would get help from the authorities, but got distracted by the Trick House, which is actually a very important thing for us because if you complete all the levels, we'll get the chance to capture some exclusive Pokemon. For now though, we can only complete level 1 as we have to complete the entire Pokemon League to unlock the final level, so we'll definitely be coming back here once that's done. I also evolved Surskit into Masquerain, Rattata to Raticate, and Zigzagoon into Linoon because we're biking to the Route 120 May rival battle. Notorious for ending so many speedruns, and today we'll be taking revenge for them. The rain is also up in this fight, which works in my favor as Masquerain can use Water Pulse to one-shot her Phanpy on turn 1. She then brought out a water type of her own in Wailmer, so I swapped out into Raticate and used its sharp fangs to deflate it. For the next 2 Pokemon, I swapped back to Masquerain and used Water Pulse to knock both of them down, and this would only leave her with Pikachu and Slowpoke. The former got a concussion from my Linoon's headbutts, but Slowpoke started to become the ace of this story. Because I forgot that this thing was part poison type, it was able to start spamming Bubble Beam, which was already boosted due to the rain. Combine that with a hard-hitting Sludge and Psybeam 2, and all of a sudden, 4 of my 6 team members were defeated by it, with Poliwag avenging all of its fallen comrades by delivering the final Body Slam to it. That would see us defeat May, which allowed us to move on to Mauville City, which would now be the home of many Electric-type Pokemon, which meant I had to snag a Pichu, Hisuian Voltorb, Electrike, Elekid, and Magnemite. On the route west of Mauville, I also fished up a Chinchou and Barboach, and then we would move east to Route 117, which has a beautiful new landscape with waterfalls. However, the perfect egg hatching method has unfortunately been removed, because this is where everybody used to bike from east to west. But the encounters on this route mostly consisted of bug types like the useless Illumise and Volbeat, but we also picked up Nincada and Cascoon. We also made a quick pit stop in Verdant Turf to pick up the Rock Smash HM, and then prepared our team for the upcoming battles against the two Big W's. Gyarados, Wally, and Watson. I firstly used my one and only Moonstone to get Nidoqueen because I bet that a fully evolved ground-type Pokemon can do bits against the electric-type gym leader. Our second ace in the hole for this would be Donphan, but we also did some less useful Pokemon like Poliwhirl, Loudred, and Beedrill. With these beauties, we embarrassed Wally in front of his uncle by punching his Pidgeotto, drowning out his Growlithe, using Aerial Ace and Bite from Doduo and Nidoqueen to deal with Ledian. By the way, even more at Kirlia, even though we were at a type disadvantage. I also had to take down Marshtomp with wing attacks from Swablu, which hurt a little bit, and Loudred got King of the Ring after getting his second KO against his final Pokemon, Eevee. With the tail between his legs, Wally leaves us alone, and we step through the hazardous lightning beams in Watson's gym. I did make a few tweaks to the team, like adding Swinub, Teddiursa, and Cubone, which should make this a lot smoother, because we're not getting defeated by this balding old man. Now, first things first, he started off with a Volbeat, which is not an electric type, but the RNG gods were on our side as Swinub hit a critical hit Ancient Power, which made him so scared that he swapped out into Metang. With its Metal Claws, both of my brown cuties ended up getting teared to shreds, but because of my Cubone's Boomerang, Donphan was able to take revenge with Mudshot. For the next Pokemon, Alolan Electrode, I decided to swap out into Beedrill, expecting a Grass-type move. From there on out, Shockwaves brought me down to 8 HP, but we were able to stab it with a couple of Pin Missiles, which forced out his Raichu. It would clean me up with Quick Attack, but Donphan still had some fight left in him. He would tank his Psybeam, then one-shot with Mudshot, and even snap out of his own confusion against the next Pokemon Volbeat, and proceeded to crush it with a Rock Throw. All of this fighting left him with only 2 HP left, which was easily taken away by his Manectric's Quick Attack, so I brought out Nidoqueen, who with its Dig and Poison Point ability managed to come out on top against his Electric Hound, leaving him with just Porygon. And I wanted to see this out normal type against normal type, so I brought out Teddiursa, who immediately got paralyzed by his Tri-Attack, which was actually a good thing because this activated our Guts ability. Now our slashes would do even more damage, and with just 2 of them, this blocky duck got cut into a million pieces. With the Dynamo badge in hand, we could now break tiny rocks that block our path, which is great because that's exactly what happened on round 112. I did also capture the best Pokemon ever, Mudkip, here for finding a newly added area called the Weird Ruins. This basically serves as a new fossil revival place, and since we've already found ourselves the fossil for Lileep, I immediately revive it here. This next section leads us through a tiny desert part where I picked up Trapinch, Baltoy, Gligar, and finally Diglett. But then we'd be surprised even more as we ran into a very powerful trainer named Sydney, who's already heard of us from our old friend Steven. He wanted to see how strong we really were, so I took up his challenge and got my ass whooped. Not only were his Pokemon higher leveled than mine, I just wasn't prepared for a basically fully evolved team at this point. This defeat showed me that we shouldn't have mercy for the trainers we're facing, so I started to take things seriously by adding Ursaring, Fraligator, and Golduck to my squad, and went back for round 2. I threw out my Donphan against his Primeape and used Mudshot to bring it down to around half HP and lower its speed. We also tanked a Brick Break very well, and just as I was about to defeat it, he swapped out into Cacturn. This prompted me to switch as well into Sneasel, who could one-shot it with a Sludge. His Primeape would also be defeated the turn after with Aerial Ace, but Houndoom would put a damper on the killing spree with Fire Pledge. So I swapped in Fraligator and used Bubble Beams, which were able to send it back to hell. Crawdon then got the revenge kill, and we responded with Ursaring Slash. He brought out his ace Absol, which cleaned up Ursaring and Donphan, but Gyarados was still around to save the day. With a few Water Pulses, we would come out on top, which left him with just Umbreon. We hit one more Dragon Rage before getting taken down to our final Pokemon as well, which ended up being Golduck. Yes, we got poisoned due to Toxic, but we also got incredibly lucky by confusing his Umbreon with Water Pulse. In the end, they hit themselves in their confusion way too many times, and so we took the win home, and got a few nice items as our reward: Black Glasses and the Black Belt to boost our Dark and Fighting type moves. We then left the desert behind for a bit to capture a Vulpix and Charmander in and near the Fiery Path, and traverse through it to get to the round 111 valleys. Here I would find Zigzagoons blocking off a path, so just like with Chikorita in the woods, we'll have to come back here after the Pokemon League. Round 113 is quite literally a health hazard with all the ashes flying around, but I got through it with a little bit of lung damage and a few more extra Pokemon for the Pokedex. Those being Gulpin, Spinda, Tangela, Seviper, and Sudowoodo. Fall Arbor Self also hosted a few normal types for its own: Jigglypuff, Girafarig, and Stantler, and the final encounter before Meteor falls would be Zangoose. We nearly got arrested by the police after this because we broke into a Lotad's home, knocked it out, robbed the entire place, and left. I still feel bad for it until this day. Maybe I I should have just adopted the little fella and channeled my inner Mirror B, but unfortunately there's no way to change the past. So instead I focused back on my main goal, getting every Pokemon trapped into a tiny little ball. And that's exactly what I did with Solrock, Lunatone, Mauville, Sableye, Onix, and Beldum. Our catching spree then got interrupted by a local gang fight between Team Aqua and Magma, and since I'm part of the Lilycove Locos, I can't let them be on my turf. So we told them to scram from this sacred place and promised that if we would ever see their faces again, that they would be in for a world of hurt. This left the rest of Meteor Falls open for me to explore. There's now multiple rooms that have different encounters, so I explored all of these and ended up getting 3 new Pokemon: Smoochum, Clamperl, and the pseudo-legendary Dratini. I would then head back outside just to see that 2 Pidgeys were playing bodyguard among a waterfall, so there must be something interesting behind them as well. I tried to chuck some rocks to get them to leave, but that didn't work. So I picked up my Trico and Tropius from the local route and did a little evolutionary session because we'd be going to the top of Mount Chimney. I made a quick pit stop at the Pokemon Mart inside of Fall Arbor because they sell nearly every evolutionary stone besides the Water Stone, which is supposed to be available in Lavaridge Town, and so I got my hands on Octillery, Azumarill, Fearow, Nidoking, Togetic, Wigglytuff, and finally Kingler. A quick cable cart ride later and we'd reach the top of the volcano. But there was something really unusual going on here. The entire place was filled with pirates and a storm was engulfing the entire mountaintop. I investigated further to see that Archie had filled up the entire crater of the volcano with rainwater with the power of a meteorite, also that water-type Pokemon had a new place to stay, which isn't even an issue with all the water that's already in Hoenn. Yes, this doesn't really sound like the most evil plan, but this is certainly going to drive out tons of fire-type Pokemon that already live here. So let's not let him play a bioterrorist and stop his plan right here, right now. Because the rain is up in this place, I decided to add a ton of water-type Pokemon to my team, with Octillery getting an immediate kill on his Mightyena with Octazooka and Signal Beam. 2 more Octazookas later, and Sableye would also be filled with ink, and even though we confused the Sharpedo with a Signal Beam as well, we did eventually get taken out by its sharp fangs. I then swapped into another water type, my Kingler, who could use Body Slam and Aqua Jet, which showed Archie that he's the king of the sea, but little did I know that he'd be going for the mirror match, bringing out a Kingler of his own and defeating me because we already got hit by a crunch. We did also paralyze it with one of our Body Slams, so now my Azumarill could easily finish it off. It would nearly overpower his Crobat as well, bringing it all the way down to rate HP and paralyzing it, but in the end, Confuse Ray got the better of me. But the deal was already sealed. All we needed from here on out was Golduck's Water Pulse and Extra Sensory to fend off his last 2 Pokemon, and so we stopped yet another one of Archie's plans. We then scaled down the mountain through the Jagged Pass, where we not only found Dunsparce and Pinsir, but also got jump scared by this big-looking fella on the side of the mountain. Till this day, I have no idea what it's supposed to resemble, but once I get my hands on the Acro Bike, I'll be sure to scale this mountain again to talk to it. So until then, let's go to Lavaridge Town, pick up a free egg, and hatch it into that second EV we need to breed. I also added Poliwrath, Sneasler, and Blaziken to the squad because we needed a huge power-up for Flannery's team. You might think, why don't you just take a full team of water types? Well, she has a Torkoal with Drought, so they just aren't as useful here. However, I still let off with Golduck, spammed Extra Sensory until Torkoal would dive down into the sea. After getting taken down by Magmar, I brought in Donphan to tank a Fire Punch and proceeded to one-shot it with Mudshot the turn after. Her Rapidash would be a bigger threat than I first expected, as both my Donphan and Nidoqueen ended up being pierced by its horn. But due to my Poison Point ability and Poliwrath hitting a Body Slam, we were eventually able to send it back to the stable. This left her with Blossom, Macargo, and Alolan Executor, so I brought out my Blaziken's Flaming Fists and knocked them all out with 1-2 smackaroos. Now that we have our heat badge, the next gym battle would be against our father, and it wasn't far off, just a little bit of backtracking was needed. Along the way, I unlocked a new part of the desert, which got me the Claw Fossil, so we evolved that to get Anorith. I also found one of the most useful held items in Leftovers on the other side of Rusturf Tunnel, and proceeded to add fighting-type prodigies to my team who could hopefully wallop Norman's normal types, namely Hariyama and the 3 Hitmon brothers. I then stepped foot into my father's chamber, and from looking me straight in the eyes, he clearly knew what my plan was, and prepared himself with Swellow. So I brought in Hitmontop and used Fake Out, Counter, and Mac Punch to bring it all the way down to red HP before dying to Steel Wing. I then send out Hariyama and use his big hands to clap both Swellow in the incoming Snorlax's cheeks. His Miltank then tanks a Brick Break surprisingly well, and even makes my Hitmonleaf fall in love with it, and because of all of that simping, he became an easy target for Miltank to take down. So I brought in Hitmonchan, used Fake Out and Brick Break, which would squeeze all the milk out of it, and Exploud didn't really like this and used its icy breath to freeze me over. So I brought in Blaziken, used Brick Break to take this down, and hit a decent attack on Slacking 2. Unfortunately, its Earth Power was able to one-shot me, so I brought in Sneasler and spammed Submission on him and the final Pokemon Zangoose, which would see me gain the Ballad's badge and finally prove to my dad that we're not a disappointment. As a reward, he gives me a heartfelt speech and the HM for Surf, which unlocks so many water-type routes and encounters for us. On Route 105, we got Seadra, Talo, Wingull, and Staryu. In the ancient waters across Granite Cave, we woke up some old forgotten beings, like Kabuto and Omanite. The next few routes hosted Spheal, Wailmer, and the most elusive Generation 3 Pokemon Feebas, whose accessibility was way better here in Royal Sapphire. We also made a quick pit stop at the abandoned ship because the water there hosted a Ghastly, Misdreavus, and Shuppet for me to capture, and we would also get one more Mantine and Wooper. After this, we normally go to the Weather Institute. Unfortunately, this entire path has been blocked off by a guy and his Magnemites, all because the power has gone down in New Mauville, and Watson needs us to go and fix it. So we grab his basement key, sail to the stranded people of the cycling road, and start capturing everything that's hiding in New Mauville. These consisted of a Alolan Sandshrew, Skarmory, and Porygon. We then traversed the dangerous terrain that was filled with exploding Voltorps and an unhinged Pokemon collector that attacked me with his level 40 Pidgey. Once we smacked him out of the way, we could turn the power back on, go back to Watson, pick up our HM for strength that we get as a reward, and got to exploring the new island that we just unlocked. Besides this waterfall area, I picked up a Gloom and Absol before moving to the big jungle grass up ahead. Just like a wild jungle man, I started cutting it down with a katana and captured Shuckle, Scyther, and Tauros. My journey to the Weather Institute got interrupted once again by a Blastoise that tried to blast me off of a bridge. So as his punishment, we trapped him in my PC forever, then grabbed one of my water stones and used it to evolve Lombre into Ludicolo, and together with him, we gave a dance class at the Institute. We had a big crowd of pirates here that wanted to learn how to dance, which was perfect, but they didn't really have what it takes because of their sea legs. Once our lesson was fully finished, the employees here decided to put together their money and give me a cast form, and you already guessed it, that this thing is never getting used, because it's straight up trash. My next goal was reaching Fortree City, so I evolved Poochyena into Mightyena and got my energetic Vigoroth to calm down, which turned him into the sofa chilling Slacking. I then crossed the nearby bridge and got interrupted by a shape-shifting May, who for a few seconds had this old red man skin. This of course creeped me out, so I used Mightyena to try and defend myself. This instigated a battle between the both of us, and we delivered the first killing blow by hitting 2 Shadow Balls on her Alolan Raichu. Then I sent out my Octillery to use Surf to wash away her Blaziken and Swellow. Slacking then somehow broke the brains of Wailord with his headbutts, Ursaring took care of her Galarian Slowking, and Kingler used Aqua Jets to spunk Donphan Strunk. Her old man version would then give me the HM for Fly, which we can't use yet since we need to defeat Winona first, but I got distracted by a couple of things. Firstly, this cute little Swablu that was just chilling at the start of Fortree, then a trade where I had to give up my Pikachu for a Wynot named Because, and we then stomped some Kecleons with the help of Steven's Devonscope. I then built a team that could easily take on Winona by getting myself a Hisuian Arcanine, Electrode, Rhydon, Aggron, and Lantern. To make this fight a little harder, it has also been turned into a double battle, but that didn't save her Gyarados and Skarmory from my Electrode and Arcanine's Flamethrowers and Thunderbolts. She would then bring in a Heracross with this awesome new sprite, and I'm not gonna lie, with the wings being out, I would also mistake this for a flying type, but it started Swords Dancing, which got scary incredibly quick. So I had to double up on it with another Flamethrower Thunderbolt combo, which sent it to Bug-type heaven. Her Flygon would then Earth Power my Arcanine, and because it's 4 times super effective, I'm not surviving it. I would then bring out my Rhydon and she her Altaria, and after 2 more turns, Thunderbolts and Rock Blast would take care of the Cotton Candy Bird. However, Flygon was also able to finish off my Rhydon. So we yet again send out 2 new Pokemon the next turn, Tropius and Lantern. After a couple of turns of hitting Thunderbolts, they're both able to take down my Electrode. The rest of my remaining 2 Pokemon, Pikachu and Aggron, easily got defeated by Earth Powers as well. But during all this, Lantern kept on spamming Aurora Beam, which was 4 times super effective against both of my opponents, which got them sent on the next flight out of here. We steal the Feather Badge out of her luggage and go to Route 20 because there's a new spot here called the Scorched Cave. If the name doesn't already imply what it is, it's basically a place for us to get some extra fire type encounters. So I used it to grab Flareon and Torkoal. The rest of the route has basically been turned into a gauntlet bridge where you need to defeat a couple of trainer battles, but the rest of the road to Lilycove was quite easy to get through. I also knew another rival battle with May was coming up soon, so I swapped out some of my team members for Ampharos, Gardevoir, and Jumpluff. We then went to look around in Lilycove, where May is no longer blocking the department store, but instead half of the town. And she has also ditched her old mana tire. Our last battle wasn't too long ago, but her team definitely got a big buff. She now starts off with her Blaziken, who gets destroyed by a single Psychic from my Gardevoir. I hit another very hard-hitting Psychic on the next Pokemon Flygon before getting taken down by 2 Earth Powers, which meant I had to bring in Jumpluff, who could drain away Flygon and the next Pokemon Wailord's health. Her Slowking would then burn me down with a Flamethrower, but my Noctowl would knock that crown straight off of his head. Ampharos won the battle of the electric types by body slamming away at her Raichu, and last but not least, Blaziken would exercise her Ms. Drivas. This would be one of the last times we see May, cause she realizes Pokemon battling just isn't laid away for her, and she's instead going to try and complete the Pokedex before me. Another delusional dream of her that will definitely crush. After this display of power, I would stay in Lilycove for a little bit longer to pay respect to the locos by getting rid of some Pokemon that were causing a ruckus along with Team Aqua. These were Clefable, Granbull, Mr. Mime, Miltank, and Kangaskhan. With them locked up for life, we just needed Team Aqua to leave our city alone. And we heard a rumor that they were planning something at Mount Pyre. So we grabbed our vacuums and put on our Ghostbuster outfit and tried to drive the mystery van straight in there. That wasn't possible since the entire place was engulfed by water. There were a couple of nice Pokemon in this water that I did end up picking up. Golbat, Claydol, and the elusive Unknown that we luckily don't need to catch every form of, because they're a 1% encounter and that would be the biggest pain in the butt. With that out of the way, I finally reached these sacred burial grounds where we captured Meditite, Duskull, and Murkrow. However, the inside of Mount Pyre was still blocked off by a Duskull that wanted to protect something. Not even all of our Ghostbuster gear would scare it away. So I'd head to the top of the mountain instead. But we were too late. Team Aqua and Archie had already arrived and stole the sacred red orb from the old couple that's supposed to protect it. He plans to use it to resurrect not only Kyogre, but another legendary being, who combined can not only drown Hoenn, but the entire world. So out of desperation, the old couple gives me the blue orb so we can go after him and try to stop this madness. They send me off to Slateport City where they're supposed to steal a submarine. We try to warn the employees there, but they're way too busy dealing with the press. And by the time we get inside, they've already submerged. This means they probably took it away to their base, which is supposed to be in Lilycove. So let's put on a ski mask and prepare ourselves for a big heist. I needed a special crew to pull something like this off. So as my scout, I took on Exeggutor, who could look everywhere with his large neck. Espeon would be the perfect Pokemon to crawl into the minds of the Team Aqua grunts to make them look away as we enter the hideout. Persian would be able to crawl in the shadows, which is perfect to disable their alarm systems. Seeking would allow us to enter their hideout in the first place, and lastly, Pidgeot and Dodrio would be our getaway cars, in case things went south. Without any help, we traversed the hideout without any problems, but I was super shocked to see Mr. Briny standing at the boat docks. He's been blackmailed into guarding this place, and even though he doesn't want to fight us, he has no other choice. Luckily for me, he's more of a sailor than a battler, with his team being kind of weak. I mean, he quite literally had a Magikarp on his team. I don't know what he was expecting. So this battle ended up being over in less than 10 seconds. He then explains to me that they stole Pico again and were sailing to a special island that he gave them the coordinates for. Shortly after these events, Steven also joins the party and says that everything's going to be fine. With Captain Stern's help, they found out that they're currently heading to Navel Rock, a special place somewhere in the Sevi Islands of Kanto. This makes Steven believe that Archie's actually after the legendary Pokemon Lugia, who's also known as the King of the Sea. That's why he called up a special trainer from the Kanto region to go and investigate already. And me and Steven joined them right away because we'll be teleporting to Navel Rock with his Claydol. Once I arrive, I learn that Steven's backup is actually green, and they'll be holding off the admins Shelly and Matt while we go and search for Archie. But once we arrive at Lugia's chamber, it's already too late. Archie has used the power of the red orb to subdue Lugia and capture it, and he's going to use it to try and wipe me out. Nothing nothing I have is really the best answer for this Lugia, so I just started out with Persian and used Fake Out and Shadow Ball to do a little bit of chip damage on it. 2 extra sensories did blow up my cat's brain, so I had to go into Rhydon, and with 1 more Rock Blast, Lugia would already be defeated. But Archie wasn't done. He still had a full team of Pokemon ready to go. The first one of these was Dusclops, who couldn't survive 2 Earthquakes. Yes, his Kingdra's Water-type moves were too much for my Rhydon to handle, and with Outrage, my Alolan Executor would also be one-shot. So instead, I tried out Espeon, and this seemed to work. 3 Psychics later, and the Seahorse would be down. With his Overquill coming out next, my Espeon and Dodrio would be doomed because it exploded upon me. This only left me with 1 Pokemon, Pidgeot. But that turned out to be perfect, as Brave Bird dealt with Poliwrath. 2 Extreme Speeds would be enough to finish off his last Pokemon, Sharpedo. Even though Archie lost, at the end of the day, the mission was still a success, because with Lugia's powers, they can move on to the next part of their plan. He then teleports away with his Dusclops, and we reunite with Steven, who says that it's not our fault. We still have our connection to their submarine, so if they make another move, we'll know exactly where to strike. Until then, he urges me to go and take on the Mossdeep gym leaders Tate and Liza, which will also allow us to dive deep under the ocean. But before we do that, I make a quick pit stop at the Safari Zone, where we grab Heracross, Sunflora, Chansey, and Snorunt. With these Pokemon acquired, I surfed across the ocean and found this weird looking cave that didn't really seem to have a purpose at all. I tried to come back here in the post game, but it really didn't seem to do anything. So I left it alone, grabbed all the Pokemon in the surrounding waters, which were Vaporeon, Tentacruel, and Huntail, before reaching Mossdeep itself. Here we get some new intel from Steven. Team Aqua is currently drilling a hole inside of the Seafloor cavern, and we need to go after them as fast as we can. But we can't do that without our next gym badge. So I prepared my team to take on some Psychic-type beasts by adding in Houndoom, Dusclops, and Banette. Followed this up by sliding through the gym and standing face to face with the telekinetic twins. They tried to catch me off guard with the Tyranitar and Alakazam, but with Hitmonlee's high jump kick and Dusclops' Shadow Ball, both would faint on the first turn. Also, don't ask me why their Alakazam went Psychic on my Dusclops and not on Hitmonlee. It doesn't make sense, but I love this bad AI. My following 2 opponents were Slowking and Espeon, which meant the quick death of my Hitmonlee. But he luckily got replaced by my Absol, who could easily take down their Espeon with Shadow Balls. They would then send out its brother Umbreon, while Slowking KO'd my Dusclops. This was the perfect opportunity for me to bring out Hariyama, so we could double up on Umbreon with X-Scissor and Brick Break. This managed to take it down, and yes, my Absol also went down in this turn, but that meant they only had 2 Pokemon remaining, the Slow Brothers. So I used Houndoom's Crunch, Hariyama's Shadow Punch, and Banette's Shadow Balls to claim victory over this battle at the skin of my teeth. Now that we had the Mind Badge, I could safely use Dive. I did go on a little side quest first, picking up the scanner inside of the abandoned ship, so I could trade it in with Captain Stern for the Choice Band. I also ended up finding a couple more Pokemon inside of the water. Those were Kingdra, Cradily, Crawdaunt, and Gorbis. I then put on my scuba suit and reached the Seafloor cavern. A really good change here is that you can just heal your Pokemon right outside of the cave, so you don't always have to run back to the Pokemon Center in case you get low on Mons. Speaking of Mons, this cave hosted quite a few for me to capture. I'm talking Politoed, Celio, Piloswine, Larvitar, Jinx, Galarian Slowking, Duck Trio, and Jugong. Besides all of that, there is also an added ice puzzle, plus the water current puzzle has also been fully reworked, and if you fail on that one, you'll be sent back to the beginning. So you better save your progress each time you get to a new checkpoint. In the end, we have the big showdown with Archie and Kyogre, where he activates the red orb, which causes the entire area to be engulfed by a dangerous storm, and Kyogre has fled the scene to ensue chaos. Archie, of course, didn't expect that something like this could ever happen. He thought he would be able to control its power, and so him and his team go after it. In the meantime, Steven and Maxie have also showed up, and they tell me to head to Sootopolis as fast as we can, because Kyogre has been spotted inside of the ancient Cave of Origin. But I needed to find a way to Sootopolis first, and that's how I got a couple of nice new Pokemon like Wartortle, Muk, Sharpedo, and Kabutops. It also seems like I've taken a wrong turn because all of a sudden I was in Pacific Log Isle. I was surprised to see that the town was no longer placed on water, but as I was checking out some of the houses here, I found a random Team Aqua Grunt that was supposed to be guarding the Master Ball, so I snatch it from under his nose, and I'll make make sure we don't waste this ball on anything else but the roaming legendary, which will be unlocked once we become champion. We also met the protector of Pacific Log Isle, a Charizard, and even though we already have a Charmander, that would mean we don't have to evolve it anymore, so I picked this thing up as well. After a little diving session, we eventually make our way to Sootopolis, where we find a couple of new encounters like Sceptile, Meganium, Alolan Raichu, Shiftry, and the big boy Snorlax. We then run into Wallace and Steven, who take me to the Cave of Origin itself, and I absolutely love the new look they gave this, because in my opinion, the original Cave of Origin was kind of lackluster. Here we have waterfalls, sapphires everywhere, and there's just a lot more open space that makes it feel more sacred. Almost like what they did back in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. We also added a few more Dex entries here, Alakazam, Crobat, Steelix, and Bagon, but it seems like we took too long. Archie already got here before us and captures Kyogre right in front of our face. Now that he has the power of both Lugia and Kyogre, the entire world might be screwed, unless we stop him right here, right now, and become the hero of this story once again. He then throws out these two legendaries, and don't ask me how they fit in this tiny chamber, but I'm going to make it even more cramped up because I throw out Kingdra and Electro to face both of them. With the rain up, my Electro's thunders are always going to hit, which is perfect, and when we combine that with my Kingdra's Ice Beam, Lugia becomes an easy target to take down in just turn 2. We are also able to hit another Thunder on Kyogre to take away about half of its HP, but my Electrode also ends up dying to a counter Thunder in the same turn. That's when I bring in Sneasler, and with one more Dragon Breath and Super Power, his two big ace-in-the-hole legendaries were already defeated. But Archie wasn't ready to give up his dream yet, so in a fit of rage, he used the rest of his team against me too. He led off with his trusty Crobat, who could overpower my Kingdra with Sludge Bombs, but not before we also hit Ice Beam. Lantern would then clean it up with a Thunderbolt, but his Dusclops Earthquakes were the end of me. I brought out Executor and used some explosive eggs to send it back to the afterlife, but his own Kingdra came out with an Outrage the turn after, which would see my Palm Tree chopped down. Sneasler could deal with this and the incoming Sharpedo, but because I used Superpower, I decided to swap out into Hitmonlee once Poliwrath hit the field. He wasn't strong enough to take me down in one turn, so we kicked it out of here with a high jump kick. Last up would be his Overquill, and once it took down my Hitmonlee, I would send out my final Pokemon Sneasler and deflate it with 2 more Sky Uppercuts. After our battle, Archie says that it's back to square one. He finally realizes that he was wrong. Not even the Overlords of the Sea would stand by his plan. He asks me to tell everybody that Team Aqua is disbanded, and as one final question, he asks me what my name is, because through all of this, who foiled all of his plans. Once we tell him our name, he says that he needs to atone for his sins and mysteriously disappears. After all of this, we reunite with Steven and tell him the good news. He congratulates us for saving the region and will be waiting for me at the end of the Pokemon League, because we'll have to snag our final gym badge off of Wallace first. So let's waste no time and get right to it. Just like with the Archie battle, there's rain up here. So I start out with my Kingdra against his Politoed. Turned out this wasn't the best matchup because my Dragon Breaths weren't enough to kill, and in the end, the currents were too much for my Seahorse. But Electrode would once again be a saving grace, using Thunderbolts, Thunders, and Giga Drains to wipe Politoed, Lantern, Dugong, and his Milotic off of the map. We did get poisoned by a Toxic, so once his Lapras came out, this damage would have racked up way too much and we went down to the disease. However, Hitmonlee and his high jump kick never disappoints, and after breaking Lapras' shell and doing decent damage against his final Pokemon Starmie, Lantern would be able to deliver the final blow with Thunderbolt. Now that we have our Rain Badge, we can use the HM Waterfall to climb up the Victory Road, where just outside we grabbed Starmie and Delibird and then walked straight into it. At first, everything seemed normal, with me being able to capture a Scizor here, but the deeper we got, the more pretty cool changes we saw. The environment here had been totally flipped up his head, with some of the sections being incredibly hot with lava flowing through it, and other ones being so freezingly cold that ice took over the entire section. Turns out, all of these changes were made due to 3 Pokemon, the legendary beasts Entei, Suicune, and Raikou. So of course, we had to go ahead and capture all 3 of them, because they would be a huge help in our next few challenges. Inside of these new sections, we also grabbed tons of new Pokemon. Those consisted of Rapidash, Magmar, Walrein, and Glalie. However, there was still one more challenge before we could even leave Victory Road itself, and that was a battle against our long-forgotten rival Wally, who wants revenge for his humiliation back in Mauville City. But just like Real Madrid thought that they could win against Arsenal last season, this victory just wasn't in the cards for him. First, we drained away his Swampert's health with my Electrode. Then we washed away his Arcanine with Kingdra's Surfs. Heracross would be burned up by my Entei, Jolteon would also be drained, Pidgeot got shocked out of the sky by Raikou, and Sneasler's Sludge Bomb combined with poison damage would take care of his final Pokemon Gardevoir. This meant we could finally make it outside, and as I gazed upon the beauty of the Pokemon League, this one goal we were fighting for was nearly completed. But we also saw someone special standing in front of the gates. Our old friend Green that helped us out back in Kanto. She was once a Pokemon League champion contender there too, and would love to see how strong the Hoenn trainers are. So let's show her that we're the superior region. The battle starts off in our favor, with Sneasler being up against her Kangaskhan. All we need is 2 Sky Uppercuts to deal with it, and while I thought we would easily be able to one-shot her Clefable as well, she lived on 1 HP and hit a 4-time super effective Psychic to end me off. This might have caught me off guard a little bit, but I wasn't phased. I calmly brought out Kingdra, who could use Surfs and Ice Beams to clean this, Victory Bell, and Gengar up. We would then get taken out by her Ninetales, but Hitmonlee could come in and use a high jump kick to force her out into her final Pokemon, Blastoise. It proceeded to blast me with a Flash Cannon, which meant I had to go into Alolan Electrode. This should be a matchup we always win. I hit the Thunder and nearly take it out, but she surprises me with a Mirror Coat, which does double damage back to me, and all of a sudden we only have 2 Pokemon left. But one of them is Raikou, so a Spark later and Green would be defeated. She might have put up a decent fight, but that was not enough to overpower the kid that saved the world, and this victory really made me feel like I was ready to become king of Hoenn. So I added 2 more members to my team, Metagross and Salamence, before stepping foot into the first Elite Four members room where we faced up against Phoebe. Her first 2 team members, Hypno and Dusclops, wouldn't really be a problem since my Metagross got an attack boost on its very first Meteor Mash usage. I did swap out the Suicune once Marowak hit the field, and just a single Hydro Pump managed to KO it. Raikou then put Miss Drevis Embanet in the hospital with Thunderbolts, and her final team member Galarian Slowking died to my Salamance's outrage. Now let's move on to the second member, Sydney, who might have given us a hard time back in the desert, but now we were prepared to steamroll him. First, we one-shot his Sceptile with Sneasler's Sludge Bomb. Nidoking and Houndoom get blasted away by Hydro Pump from Suicune, and then Absol, Overqwil, and Sharpedo, all 3 got destroyed by Sky Uppercuts as well. Up until now, the Elite Four has been a cakewalk. Let's see if Glacia is any different. At first glance, she didn't really put up a fight, with Entei using Sacred Fire to melt down her Sandslash and Glalie. For Dewgong, I opted to go for Raikou, but we end up losing this matchup due to a very hard-hitting Blizzard. I then used Sneasler's Sky Uppercuts to crush Dewgong and nearly take out Jinx. Looking back on it, I definitely should have clicked Sludge Bomb on her. As she takes me out with a Psychic, the rest of the fight became quite easy, with Metagross using Bullet Punch, Psychic, and Rock Slide to KO Jinx, Sneasler, and the final Pokemon, Walrein. Now onto what's supposed to be the hardest Elite Four member around, Drake and his Dragon types. Well, let me tell you, he didn't really put up a fight either. Raikou easily one-shot his Gyarados. Then we brought in Suicune to freeze over Flygon, Executor, Salamence, and Dragonite. And last but not least, his Kingdra would also get one-shot by my Salamance's outrage. With the Elite Four members basically being a sweep, let's hope that Steven can give me more of a fight, because he's a trainer I highly respect, and ever since he met us back in Granite Cave, he's also been waiting to face me. So let's see if this entire journey was worth the wait. He would first start off with his 2 fossils, Armaldo and Cradily. Suicune used Hydro Pump to deal with the first one and Ice Beam for the second. Claydol would surprisingly tank a Hydro Pump the turn after and finally kill me, as Cradily already crippled me down with Giga Drains before this. Metagross would then clear it out with Bullet Punch, tank an Earthquake from the incoming Aerodactyl, and mash it out of the sky with a Meteor. I then wanted to switch out against Melmetal, but he had Magnet Pull, so my Metagross would be trapped. The only thing left to do was serve him to his fate by dying to an Earthquake. Now we could safely swap in Entei, who could burn it with a Sacred Fire, tank an Earthquake, and melt it down with a second one. This drove Steven into a corner with him only having 1 Pokemon left, Metagross. So I used Sacred Fire again. This yet again didn't quite kill, and we went down to an Earthquake. But Metagross isn't known for being super fast, which meant Sneasler could outspeed, use Sky Uppercut, and end Steven's reign as champion of Hoenn. We would then be congratulated by Professor Burge and May the Quitter, and our name got cemented into Royal Sapphire history. However, our ultimate goal wasn't over yet, so we cycled back home and went back at it the next day. Once I stood up in the morning, we were surprised to see our dad. He came by just to congratulate me and even gave me an SS ticket so we could reach the battle frontier. But once our conversation runs dry, he leaves in an awkward pause and we're just left with our mother. She seemed happy to see our dad again, but this moment got interrupted very quickly by a news report saying that there is a red roaming Pokemon flying around the region and we need to go and find it. But that wouldn't be as easy as I thought, so instead I went to the Pokemon Center and went through all of my boxes picking up the Pokemon that I hadn't evolved yet. And this was an incredibly long list, so let me show you all of them. Macargo, Wobbuffet, Breloom, Butterfree, Umbreon, Delcatty, Victreebel, Blossom, Venusaur, Nuzleaf, Altaria, Weezing, Golem, Kadabra, Primeape, Machamp, Armaldo, Hypno, Ariados, Cloyster, Parasect, Xatu, Fortress, Grumpig, Camerupt, Blissey, Exploud, Bayleaf, Typhlosion, Venomoth, Cacturn, Galarian Slowbro, Manectric, Wishcash, Electabuzz, Arbok, the double evolution of Nincada into Ninjask that also gave us Shedinja, Dustox, the best Pokemon ever, Swampert, Dragonite, Magneton, Vileplume, Alolan Sandslash, Gengar, Swellow, Swalot, Pelipper, Medicham, Wailord, Grovyle, Flygon, Charmeleon, Marowak, Quagsire, Omastar, Milotic, Tyranitar, and finally Ninetales. And we still haven't gotten every regular Pokemon besides legendaries and mythicals. Speaking of those, let's get to hunting all of them. The first place I checked was Sky Pillar for the babysitter of Groudon and Kyogre, Rayquaza. He would be guarded by Drake, who says that only the destined chosen ones are allowed to face Rayquaza. But there's a reason why I'm the champion and he's just an Elite Four member. So I reminded him of that fact by basically destroying his entire team by freezing it over with Suicune's Ice Beams. He then bowed down and cleared the way for me so I could trap this massive green snake in a tiny little Ultra Ball. Then we traveled to the battle frontier, not to go and challenge it, but to have a meeting with Maxie. Because despite being prominent in the story, we've never actually battled him. So if we can beat him in a fight, he'll grant us an audience with the legendary Eon Pokemon Latios, who was mostly running a Sun team, which I took advantage of with my Entei's Sacred Fire, but despite that, most of his members would still be taken down by either my Suicune's Surfs or Hydro Pumps and Sneasler's hard-hitting Sludge Bombs. Once the Team Magma leader is defeated, he leaves me alone, and then we capture Latios for ourselves. Then I went back to the desert because the Zigzagoons that were blocking off this path before are now gone. Turns out they were protecting the mythical wish Pokemon Jirachi, and the only thing I wished for is that PSG just win the Champions League again this year. And then we also trapped this little thing inside of a ball. Back inside of Petalberg Woods, the Chikorita would also be gone, and that's where we found the time-traveling Pokemon Celebi, which my last video was based on, so if you haven't watched that yet, you should certainly do so. With Celebi added to the Dex total as well, we could see what was behind the Pidgeys that were blocking off the route next to Meteor Falls. Here we not only found the 3 legendary birds Zapdos, Articuno, and Moltres, but Archie also released Lugia, and it seems to have retreated back here. So we add all 4 of them to the collection, and then we heard a rumor about some really bad weather near Fortree City. After doing some exploring, we found out that it was the work of Kyogre. It retreated all the way back to this little river, almost like it wanted to be captured by me. So of course we couldn't pass up on it, and with a few ball throws, it would already be mine. After this, I started surfing to Pacific Lock Town again, and in a stroke of luck, Latios would straight up just show up. And since I don't want to do the Hypnosis mean look strategy, I just captured it straight away in my Master Ball. I'm just incredibly glad that I didn't have to search for it. Now the reason I went back to Pacifilog is because I needed to reach the sealed chamber for the Reggie trio. I had quite a hard time to reach the place where we needed to dive, but let me save you some time. I would always stick to the left side of the currents, and eventually you'll just pop out there. We then dove into the chamber just to see that we didn't have to do the entire Wailord and Relicanth thing. The 3 Reggies were just sitting there on their thrones. So after a couple of attempts, we captured Registeel, Regirock, and Regice, and then I got stuck for a little while because I had no idea where the rest of the Pokemon were. But after doing some research in the RomHacks Discord, I learned that 2 legendaries were being held hostage by the Trick Master. And since we were now a champion, we could complete every single one of his puzzles, which ended up being more of a pain in the butt than I thought. And even after I was able to conquer all of them, he still wouldn't just give me access access to the legendaries. He needed me to defeat him in a Pokemon battle too, and he was way stronger than I first anticipated. With a team of Alakazam, Machamp, Groudon, Ho-Oh, Celebi, and Jirachi. We got lucky though because our team has already been way over leveled compared to his, so it ended up being a sweep with Salamence and Suicune. He then moved out of the way to reveal Ho-Oh and Groudon standing right behind him, and he decided to release both so we could capture them. A very nice gesture that I immediately completed, and as we tried to leave his house, we also managed to grab an Aqua bike. What came of the Trickmaster after this is unknown because he went on a journey to look for more puzzles that he could implement here. And now the event we've all been waiting for. What is that creature that was standing in the jagged pass? I used my Aqua bike to jump up to it, just to find out that it didn't have any dialogue and the mystery remained forever. But put your guesses in the comments down below for what it could really be. Personally, I think it's just an alien from a different universe that somehow ended up here, so I'm going to let him find his way back on his own. We then went to the top of Mount Pyre to reunite the blue and red orb with the old couple where they're supposed to be, and Archie ended up doing the same. This would be the last thing we ever see of him, so let's hope that he finally changes his ways, and otherwise, maybe he should just get arrested by the police. With that, I started to scour the region for more Pokemon and ended up finding Mew just above Dewford town. Once he was acquired, I went back to Meteor Falls to capture myself an Aerodactyl in the final room there, and I also found some Pikachus doing very questionable things. I didn't want anything to do with this, so I gave them their privacy and found a way to rematch the 3 Elite Four members as well as all of the gym leaders. So we defeated Sydney inside of Regice's cave, Glacia at the end of Shoal Cave, Phoebe on top of Mount Pyre, and each and every gym leader except for our dad on board of the ferry to Lilycove. But there was one more person I needed to defeat if I really wanted to be the strongest of them all, and this would be taking place inside of a little house in Slateport City, against the creator of Royal Sapphire themselves, Gongas. He would boast an impressive team starting out with Overquill. Yes, this blowfish does not stand a chance against my Metagross's Meteor Mash, but their Arcanine certainly would, so I swapped out into Suicune and washed it away with Surf. My Entei then tanked a couple of hits from their Raichu, and we would clap back with 2 Sacred Fires, hitting another one on the incoming Melmetal. He'd be able to survive and bash me with his iron hands, so I had to bring in Salamence who could clean it up with a flamethrower. We'd also one-shot their Sneasel with a Fly, and Raikou would deliver the final blow with Thunderbolt against their Galarian Slowbro. With the creator of the game defeated, there was only one thing left to do: find the last few Pokemon that have escaped my gaze. The first one I found was in Mossdeep City, a Meltan that Steven left behind for me as a gift, so we immediately evolved that into Melmetal. Then I would go to the daycare to hatch 2 Pokemon, Squirtle and Eevee. Squirtle was the only one I didn't have of the Blastoise line, and he was never available in the wild, that's why I needed to breed him. And with Eevee, I could get access to the final evolution, Jolteon. I also did one forgotten evolution, Porygon into Porygon 2, and I would also find Hisui and Quillfish next to Fall Arbor Town to get myself an Overquill. Now there were only 2 Pokemon remaining, and they were legendaries, so they had to be in some sort of obvious location, and the only one I didn't check yet was the cave where Registeel normally resides, and that's where we ended up finding Deoxys and Mewtwo. After a tiny struggle, these 2 would also be trapped in my balls forever. And that was it. All 386 Pokemon of Royal Sapphire had been acquired and registered to my pokedex. The journey was finally over, and with pride I presented it to my mentor Professor Birch, who didn't even give me a reward. A good lesson that teaches us to do things for ourselves without expecting praise from others. And now that this adventure is behind us, I headed home for a well-deserved rest. And that's the story of how I 100% completed Pokemon Royal Sapphire. I think this game was pretty damn good. It aims what it tries to do, upgrading Pokemon Sapphire without making it too over the top. I would compare it to games that popular ROM hacker Drayano often puts out, which is a very good thing because he has only made masterpieces, from Storm Silver to Pokemon Blaze Black 2, so categorizing this game along with his definitely puts it up there with some of the best enhancement ROM hacks. Now, if you like all of the quality of life changes that, for example, Pokemon Elite Redux brings, then this might not be something for you. But for someone that just wants a little bit of extra story and doesn't even need the physical special split to be implemented, this is basically going to be the perfect version of Sapphire for you. Personally, I would give Pokemon Royal Sapphire an 8.5 out of 10 and would highly recommend it for a fresh Hoenn playthrough. With that out of the way, I want to thank my membership and Patreon supporters one last time. Their help is what makes these videos possible, so if you want to help out the channel as well, the links are in the description. And as always, people, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends. I've been Zwiggo, and I'll see you all in the next one.